trying to make film without breaking the bank, because let's face it, most of us working in women's sport, that phrase big budget doesn't often come up in conversation. So let me just now give you an example of the kind of content I can help you to create. I've got a short 3-minute film here that I made recently with a local grassroots football club in Brighton. So just have a watch. It's only short, it's 3 minutes long.
Game has got so many benefits. You know, it has the social benefits of being able to make new friends. You know, some of the girls who play with us, they only see them once or twice a week, but they call themselves their best friends, and it's so great to see those friendships blossom.
I just love the teamwork, and everyone like supports each other. It's a team sport that you're not just one person in the team, you get to play like with everyone. Oh, lucky, good defending!
I love seeing the progression in the girls. Like, you see them not only from session to session, but also throughout the ages as they go up and just develop their skills. And I think it's just really nice to watch them progress.
Look at wide, look wide, look wide, look wide! Oh, lucky.
Obviously, there are physical benefits, you know, maintaining a healthy lifestyle, which as a child, you know, it's important, but if they can maintain that throughout teenage life and into adult life as well.
Celebrating the women, the girls, everyone, not just within football, but just celebrating females in general, and getting as many numbers as we could just to celebrate the whole day, making it as big as we can. And actually, despite the weather, we've got a great turnout, so it's been really, really good to see.
The winners of the Kids League going up penalty shootout was, drum roll, the Kids!
It's so important for girls. If they can see it on TV, then they can be it. If they can see it in real life at the Amex or at Wembley, then they can be it. If they can see it at the Dripping Pan in Lewes, then they can be it.
Okay, so thanks for watching that film through. I made that with just a smartphone and also some pictures with a video camera. So what does that 3-minute film tell us? What does that video tell us? What's the story? Who are they? Well, they're Brighton Galaxy Girls, a grassroots football club for girls. What do? Well, they provide weekly training sessions. Is it successful? Yes, their membership is increasing. And what's the message? Girls football is thriving at the club with opportunities for playing and coaching. It's simple, effective, and on message. And I'm hoping to give you the tools to make that kind of content today. So if you had to make a 3-minute film for your organization or club, what would your message be? Spend just 30 seconds now, if you will, just jotting down who you are, what you do, what's your measure of success, and what's your message. Just spend about 30 seconds doing that now. There's no right or wrong. You don't have to share it. It's just useful to keep that in mind while we go through the webinar today. So if you could just spend a few seconds just doing that right now. Okay, don't worry if you haven't finished, but just keep it in mind as we go through the session. So why use short form video? Well, made properly, it can be action-packed, eye-catching, engaging, entertaining, and tell your story in just a few minutes in a way that lengthy presentations or pages and pages of words on websites can't. Also, it can be used in so many different ways. A short video can be shared with potential funders, potential sponsors. It can be used on your website to attract new members, shown in schools, shown on big screens in stadiums, on your YouTube channel, and cut down, spliced up, and shared in a multitude of ways on your social media channels. So I guess I should tell you a little bit about my story, because you're probably thinking, who am I to tell you all this, and what proof do I have that video actually works? So I'm a broadcast journalist. I work mainly in television, but also in radio and online. I'm a mum. I've got 2 children. I've got an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. I'm an athlete. I run and I swim. I started in athletics at the age of 10. I've run a marathon for England Masters, and in the summer I'm going to compete in the GB age group, a team in Belgium in the European Championships in aquathlon, that's swimming and running. I'm a massive sports fan. My family and I watch everything and anything to do with sport on the television, and we also love watching live sport, particularly athletics and women's football. I film, edit, produce and present news and sports reports for the BBC, and I've had 22 years experience working for the BBC in news and sport as a studio presenter, reporter and video journalist. And just a few pictures here of to show you what I do. Top left there is reporting live at the Amex in Brighton on the Women's Euro last summer. There's the Lionesses warming up in the background. That was just ahead of that fantastic 8-0 victory over Norway. I think the producer I was working with that day, they was more excited that the cameraman there was Eugene from Big Brother. I don't know if anyone's seen you Big Brother back in 2005, but that was Eugene. And bottom left corner there, I'm reporting live outside the Brighton and Hove Albion training ground on the appointment of Roberto De Zerbi. Middle top, that's my daughter. She's a massive football fan. That's at the Dripping Pan in Lewes, a fantastic ground. I thoroughly recommend going if you haven't already. And that's with her idol, Alessia Russo. That was watching Manchester United play Lewes in the Women's FA Cup. Middle bottom, I'm at Brands Hatch, reporting on the British Superbikes Championships. Top right there I am. I don't know whether I'm looking determined or a little bit pained. That's in the Sussex Masters cross-country race. And bottom right, all smiles before getting in a rallycross car at the Linden Hill Racing Circuit in Kent. Then I had to do a few pieces to camera in that car, and just to show you a little bit of video here, my facial expressions definitely changed. Yeah, bit of a bumpy ride there, and I had to present to camera all the way through that journey. So you have to think on your feet sometimes in broadcasting, in whatever situation you find yourself in. So let's get working on your film. Let's make a plan. Let's look at the process of making your film. Don't just grab your camera and smartphone and go out and start filming everything and anything, because your film just won't flow and you won't deliver your message. Think of your film like a piece of cotton and threading beads onto that piece of cotton. That cotton has to run right the way through to make every bead or element connect. So what I'm going to talk to you about is voices. Who is going to be talking in my film? Shots. What shots do I need to make my film work? Logistics. How much time do I have to film? What's my location? Kit. What kit do I need? And the edit. How will I pull all my fantastic material together? The more prepared you are before you start, the better your film will be. So let's talk a bit about voices. In essence, this means who are you going to hear from in your piece? To make this video appeal to viewers, it needs to have people in it. We want to see and hear from people. It's the people and players we work with or clients who use our services that makes our films and our lives, let's face it, interesting. That 3-minute film, how many voices do you remember were in there? Perhaps you could just pop it in the chat, and Kate, perhaps you could just let me know what the responses are. How many voices did we hear from in that film?
Oh, we've got a range: 4, 3, 5, 7, 8, 3, 6.
Fantastic. Brilliant. If you said 5, you were bang on. 5 voices in a 3-minute film, a mixture of male, female, young players, a new coach, and 2 directors of the club. So try and get a range of voices into your piece. Think about who you could interview, who would be best to get your message across. Don't forget to chat to the players or people who benefit from your organization, not just the staff or the board members, just because you think you have to include them. So maybe just jot down on that piece of paper where you made a few notes about your message, who you'd like to talk to in your piece. As important as it is to include the right voices, don't be afraid to leave people out. You can't squeeze 20 interviews into a short film just because you think you have to include those people. Don't try to please everyone. Really think about who best delivers your message. Think about diversity. Think about a diverse range of voices in terms of, for example, gender, age, ethnicity, background, and ability. Make sure you have that diverse range and make sure that that range of voices best reflects your organization. Believe it or not, I've seen pieces about para sport that don't feature a single para athlete. So just make sure you're properly reflecting your organization. Important point here, get consent if you want to film under 18s. So there were a couple of young players in that piece you saw who were speaking to me. Absolutely fine, but just make sure they're okay to appear on camera. Most clubs and schools will have their own lists of who can and can't be filmed, but make sure you check that in advance and make sure whoever you're filming with, that they identify those young people to you, and really make sure, just be very careful they don't accidentally appear in the background on shots if they can't be filmed. Now, think about the background for your interviews. Where are you going to place your guests when you speak to them? If you think back to that film, the interviews were done on the football pitch. They had a background that was relevant to the film itself. Where are you going to put your interviewees when you speak to them? Think about your message again. What's your organization and what message are you trying to get across? If your organization is all about getting active and being involved in sport, do you really want your main talker in a suit and sitting behind a desk in an office or by a white wall? No, you want some action in the background, and your interviewee wearing something that's relevant to your club or your organization, and wearing something they're comfortable in their day-to-day role. So perhaps put them pitch side or in a playground or in a sports hall, somewhere that is relevant to who you are and what you do. If you're worried about the noise interfering from perhaps players in the background, put a bit of distance between your interview and the action in the background so you don't get that noise interfering. Now, please, 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 this is the biggest bugbear of mine. Please don't try and squeeze a big banner or a big company logo into your interview. I've seen it done so many times and it doesn't work. Don't bother. You want your viewer to focus on the interviewee and what they're saying. That's critical. You want to be able to hear and focus on what they're saying, not on some massive banner that you try to squeeze in with them. Invariably in the edit, the words get cut off. So active becomes tiv and Sussex becomes, well, no need to explain that. So be very careful. No banners. You can get the name of the organization in by putting their name and their organization in a name caption, or at the end of your edit, as we saw in that film, or just get that banner as a separate shot. Simple as that. No script I've written here. Don't give your interviewee the questions in advance. They will ask for them, but say no. Guaranteed they'll go home, they'll script their answers, rehearse for hours in front of the mirror, turn up on the day, forget everything that they've practiced and rehearsed, feel nervous and fall apart, and then be completely unable to string a sentence together. Rehearsing doesn't come across as natural. By all means, give the areas for questioning. That's absolutely fine, but not the exact questions. Looking room. How will you frame your interview? Will your interviewee look towards the reporter this way, or will they look straight into the camera? This technique of staring into the barrel of the camera, as we call it, or looking straight into the camera, works really well for a direct appeal. Perhaps if you're appealing for some funds, for example, or new members to join our club, come and join our club, come and join our group, help us to raise funds for something. Those sorts of direct appeals work really well if a guest is looking down the barrel of the camera. But if you want to put your interviewee at ease, maybe ask them to look towards the reporter or you as the interviewer and say to them, just ignore the camera. They might feel a little bit more comfortable that way. So here's an example of Matt in that film I did. He's looking towards me.
It's so important for girls. If they can see it on TV, then they can be it. If they can see it in real life at the Amex or at Wembley, then they can be it. If they can see it at the Dripping Pan in Lewis, then they can be it.
So there's Matt looking towards me. I was able to say to him, don't worry about the camera, just ignore it, look my way. And it comes across as a normal, natural conversation. And you'll notice there in the background, there were a few players blurred in the background. It sets the scene, it sets him in context as the director of the club. Finally, what questions are you going to ask? One word, kiss. No, you don't have to do that to your interviewees. Kiss, keep it short and simple. Remember, we're making short films here, not Hollywood blockbusters. So don't spend any longer than 10 minutes on an interview. That's the maximum. Otherwise, you'll end up with so much material, so much content. You'll have to wade through it all when you come to the edit. You'll have too much to choose from in terms of clips, and it will take you forever. So keep your interviews brief. Type of questions you can ask. Open questions. Help your interviewee to warm up a little bit. So you might want to start with just something simple like, so tell me a little bit about your club. What do you do? And that gives them a chance to answer something easy that they're comfortable with. What's been the impact of the Lionesses' success on membership? How important is it that girls get the opportunity to play? Talk me through other career opportunities in the sport. Open questions that they get the opportunity to say something about. Don't ask closed questions. And by that, I mean anything that could give you a yes or no answer. For example, have you seen an increase in numbers? No. That's an interview that's not really going anywhere. So think about your questions and always check the sound at the start. So top tip, I just normally say, just tell me your name and your job title. I wear a pair of headphones, I listen to the sound, I check it back to make sure I've got that recording. The last thing you want to do is do a great interview. Your interviewee then disappears off, never to be seen again. You get back to the edit and realize you forgot to switch on their mic. So check the sound at the start. Just going through some interview do's and don'ts with some photos here. So do carry an umbrella or a rain cover if the weather is really poor, which, let's face it, invariably it is during the winter. A lot of outdoor sports, we have to go and film in poor weather conditions. Here, I was very lucky, I had somebody working with me on work experience who was very willing to hold the brolly. I'm not sure it was a wonderful experience for her, but I guess it was the reality of life as a sports journalist. Make sure your camera is covered in some way. Rain covers for cameras are okay, they're good to keep the rain off, but it makes it very difficult to use the manual functions on cameras. So see if somebody is willing to hold an umbrella over you while you do your interviews. Most cameras don't like getting wet. They will pack up. So just be very careful of wet conditions. Middle picture here, I'm interviewing Adam Peaty. He's 6'3". So make sure you've got a tripod that extends as high as possible. You can see there, I've got the tripod fully extended. The camera is mounted on the tripod and it's actually their setup, it's taller than me. If you've got a very tall interviewee, you've got to make sure you set up your camera as high as possible. Otherwise, if the camera is tilted up towards them, it's almost like you're filming up their nose. It's not a good look. Similarly, if you're interviewing a wheelchair user, this is Dr. Nick Webborn. He's the chair of the British Paralympic Association. I've chatted to him a few times. Make sure you set up your camera at eye level with a wheelchair user. There is nothing worse than somebody standing up and peering down. It's not a good look and it doesn't send across the right message. It also makes the wheelchair user feel very uncomfortable. So just make sure your camera is set up at eye level with them, and similarly your microphone is in a suitable place. Bottom right there we have Kylie Manser, who won a Jockey Club award, and I thought it'd be a great idea to interview her with her horse in the picture as well. Turns out the horse was very affectionate and constantly wanted to nibble her ear, so it wasn't a great look when it came to the edit. So just a few things to be careful of there. Okay, let's move on to talking about shots, the actual pictures that make up your video. It seems so obvious to talk about pictures in a film, but they are critical to capturing the immediate attention of your audience. We all spend so long scrolling through social media. We watch videos, reels, news items that capture our attention with a single image at the start. So start with your best or your strongest shot. If your film is on a website or LinkedIn or other social media, YouTube, it's going to be competing with so many other videos. So make your film stand out from the crowd. Have a think about the type of action shots you could include in your piece. We're a women's sport network, so most of you, it's going to be probably about women's sports. So start with great shots of sport. It's as simple as that. Avoid lots of shots of buildings or corridors. They're not exciting. Include people. We all love people watching, so include people in your film. Vary your shots. You'll notice in that film we watched, there was a mixture of wides, some close-ups on feet kicking the balls, some shots from behind the net, and a variety of angles. If you just capture a lot of wide shots, A, it won't be interesting, and B, it won't cut very well together in the edit. So think about a range of shots. Close-ups work really well in sport. So could you get close-ups of feet? Could you get close-ups on the ball? Perhaps a hand gripping a tennis racket? Close-ups on faces? And then you can use those wide shots just to establish the scene and set the scene for where you are. Think of some interesting angles. What about filming behind a net? Or have you considered maybe using a GoPro? That works really well if you're involved in water sports or you're filming swimming. You can put the GoPro in the water or out on a paddleboard at sea. Or sometimes I film street cricket and put the GoPro just on the stumps, and that gives you a really interesting shot. So, or could you use a drone maybe to give an aerial shot of your ground or stadium? So think about an interesting range of shots. Think of a sequence I've put here. Make sure you get some sequences, otherwise your edit won't work. And when we talk of a sequence, we talk about how your video edits together seamlessly. So for example, if you're filming some tennis and you want a shot of your player putting their trainers on and tying up their shoes, in a sequence, you can get a close-up of their feet and tying the shoes. You could get a close-up of their face while they're tying the shoes. You could get a shot from behind of them tying shoes. You could get a wide shot of them tying shoes, or you could get maybe film through the net and see them tying their shoes. That's maybe not a very exciting example, but think hands, face, over the shoulder, wide shot, an interesting angle. There you have your sequence. Natural sound. It's so important, natural sound, for bringing videos to life. Sport, after all, is all about the cheers, the whistles, the shouts, the screams, the splashes, the crashes, everything. So let it breathe. Don't forget to record your sound as well as the vision. It will really bring your video to life if you can use plenty of natural sound and let that breathe. So don't put a lot of talking over your video when you've got some great screams and shouts or whistles or really great noise of someone kicking a ball. So really use that natural sound to your full advantage, because it will really bring your film to life. And don't leave it too long before you get into your first clip. So I've got a couple of examples of some pieces I've filmed, and I just wanted to give you an example of how to start your video, and opening with some natural sound and some good pictures. They came from local schools, villages, and across the Malawian countryside to run. And somewhere in the pack was an Olympic champion.
Nice.
Winning awards doesn't mean you don't get to have fun. These year 5 and 6 pupils are being taught how to play cricket in school, and some of them have even done leadership training so they can teach younger ones the game.
They have to put the bat behind the blue cone, and they can't use it no more.
He may have just returned from winning a major tournament, but the training never stops. And every tournament on the path to Paris counts.
Yes, it's my life. I love table tennis so much, and I wanted to go there and to put on a show and to show myself really how good I am still.
Brilliant. Will Bailey ending that there. So it's also very important to leave a strong shot to finish on as well. So leave a lasting impression at the end and end on a really strong shot as well. And then you could also cut to your company logo and contact details there. So we've talked about interviews and shots, some really two main elements of your film, but I just want to briefly talk to you about logistics. Now, this may all seem very obvious, but just give some thought to where you're going. Think about the exact location and the time it takes to get there. You may have a lot of camera kit or sports equipment to carry, so find out if you can park nearby or if there's public transport. If you're not prepared, it can jeopardize your entire shoot. Try to get there early to have a look around at the location before you press record and to check your kit. You don't want to arrive late, suddenly turn up, press record and find it's not working. Get there early. Shoot the action first and the interviews later. Let's say, for example, you've hired a local training facility, a pitch for just an hour, and you've got some young players ready there to film. Don't spend 45 minutes doing your interviews and then suddenly find the training session is over and you've missed all the action. Make sure you shoot the action first and do your interviews afterwards. People will always wait for you to speak to them if you run out of time, but they won't come back and do their training session again. So shoot the action first. Keep a check on the time during your shoot to make sure you don't run out of time. And at the end of the session, do think about whether you've really got the elements you need to make it work. If you had a problem with the weather, as often happens, or the light, do you need to go back and capture some other elements? That happened to me with that film. The weather was atrocious when we filmed the first section of it. I had to go back and get some other elements. So have that discussion with whoever you're filming with at the time. Don't just think, oh, I'm sure I'll be okay. I'm sure I've got a few decent pics, if you know in your heart of hearts that it's really not going to work. So that's just a little note on logistics. Now, let's move on to this area, the kit. Now, I think this might be a whole webinar by itself, cameras, kit, how to use them. But let me just give you a few pointers. I'm very aware that some of you may be very comfortable and confident with using cameras and equipment already, but for some of you who are new to it, let me try and give you a few pointers as to what you can do and the basics that you need. So unsurprisingly, it all leads back to budget. And of course, the aim of today is trying to produce a film without breaking the bank. So I'm not going to talk to you about very, very expensive camera equipment and hiring in very expensive companies to use it. So you may have already shot a lot of content on your smartphone. Some of you might be very comfortable with doing that already, and that's fine for a few clips on social media. But if you are going to produce some decent quality films, you'll need extra bits to add to your camera to really make it work. So let's consider a few things. Are you going to shoot this by yourself? If so, what are you going to shoot it with? Are you going to use your smartphone, a DSLR, or a video camera? If you know what you're doing with a good camera, you could hire one or borrow one, or you may already have one. Are you a bit unsure about doing this by yourself? And are you thinking, I think I'll hire a camera operator? If you do that, I would strongly recommend going along to the shoot with them so that you retain ownership of your film and you retain ownership of the message. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what some kit looks like. So this is the kind of kit that the BBC is using right now for mobile journalism. That's using a smartphone. It doesn't look terribly mobile, does it, from the pictures, but these are the elements that you'd need to produce a good broadcast quality film. So top left here, as discussed earlier, we have an extendable tripod that goes up to full height. Mounted on that tripod, we have the smartphone. It is buried in there. And that is cradled within a handheld device. This one is made by a company called ShoulderPod. And mounted on top of that handheld device, you've got a small light. It is something like this. And you have a top mic for the camera. And that's to pick up the sound. Just at the bottom middle there, I'm using a ShoulderPod handheld device just to grab a quick chat with Laura there, and she's wearing a personal microphone. I'll talk about these in a second. And then away from mobile journalism, so using a broadcast style camera, the two pictures on the right there, I'm using a BBC issue broadcast camera with a top microphone there, a light, tripod. I'm wearing the headphones, as you can see there. Jack Downer, World Panna Champion, chatting to you there, and Hope Powell in the corner. So don't be alarmed by all of that. That's the kit, that's the wish list. I'll talk you through about some of the basics you could pick up for not a huge budget. So let's talk them through. So I would say a tripod is a must. I think if you're going to film some interviews, spending a long time holding a camera like this is going to make your arm ache and be a bit unsteady. So a decent tripod, make sure the legs extend, is a good idea for your interviews. And you can make sure it's steady, you can monitor the sound and the vision while asking the questions. A handheld gimbal is useful for any movement if you're in sport. It stabilizes the shot and means you can move around and capture those different angles we were talking about earlier. Quality microphones. Sound is everything. It's so important. Investing in good microphones, to pardon the pun, is a sound investment. The smartphone's internal mic just isn't good enough to pick up voices clearly for your interviews, and it isn't good enough to cut out wind noise. So if you're going to make a quality film, definitely invest in some quality microphones. For a decent top mic, I would recommend the Rode Video Mic Go 2 plus the Rode Wireless Go 2 personal mics, which you can just clip on to your interviewee. These are these that I showed you earlier. So you just clip that onto your guest. It's very simple. And you'll get a much better sound quality from those. Other things just to mention: headphones for monitoring sound, spare batteries if you're using a video camera, or some sort of battery pack to recharge your phone if you run out of charge, a rain cover, a lens cloth, recording cards if you're using a camera phone, a broadcast camera, and make sure you've got plenty of space on your smartphone if you're filming that way. Lighting is also important. You can pick up one of these small top lights just to mount onto a gimbal, and that will really help you just to light your interviews if you're in low light. So apologies for rattling through that very quickly, but the kit is a huge area. Again, it's probably a whole webinar by itself, but I hope I've given you a little bit of an idea of the basics that you could invest in or borrow just to improve that quality of your film. A couple of other things to mention. If you're filming with a smartphone, film in landscape, not portrait. Otherwise, you just restrict yourself. If you film in landscape, your film can be used, you can be viewed on laptops, desktops, big screens, small screens, in schools, on your website, so many different places. If you only film in portrait, you're restricting yourself, because if it needs to be converted to landscape, you can't. And if you're watching on a television, for example, you get the really nasty big black blocks either side. So if you film in landscape, perfect, works on all platforms, and you can always convert it to vertical in the edit if you want to put clips on social media just to be viewed on a phone. So landscape, not portrait. And if you are using a smartphone, go into your camera settings and film in 4K, which is best quality you possibly can, at 25 frames per second. That is the standard frame rate in the UK. And if you want to share your film with broadcasters such as news broadcasters, sport broadcasters, they can only use your material if you shoot at 25 frames per second. So go into your camera settings, go into record video and select 4K at 25 FPS. And breathe. Okay. Anything else? Just a couple of very small points. If you want to include facts and figures, if you've got some research to include, don't get your interviewees to reel off facts and figures. They're very hard to remember. You could use an on-screen graphic or text on your film, like I did in that film you saw earlier. And the other thing to consider, who will be the voice of my film? Are you going to script it all the way through? Are you going to use music and text? Or will somebody narrate your film all the way through? Do you have a really good talker, somebody who you've interviewed who can narrate the film all the way through? That's got to be someone who's a good talker and can carry the film right the way through. But you might consider doing it that way. Just one note on on-screen text. It is well worth putting on-screen text over your interview clips as well, not just for people watching your film on silent on the train, but to make it more accessible. And on that note, if you haven't seen it already, I would thoroughly recommend watching Danielle Selwood's webinar on creating accessible content, which you can still view on the Fearless Women's productions on YouTube. So that's well worth watching for on-screen text and how to create accessible content. So those are a few things to consider. I think maybe we need to move on to the edit now, which is the last section. So let's take a little breath, because there's a lot to take in. I have some good news for you though now. You've done it. You've got your kit. You found your venue. You've got some great footage, some great interviews. You didn't get completely soaked. And you're pretty confident you have all the makings of a great film. Phew. There's only one problem. You've now got the equivalent of a load of jigsaw bits and no idea how they're all going to fit together to make one big picture. You need to edit your film. So this is what an edit looks like. Looks a bit confusing and scary. This is Final Cut Pro, which I use. It's an Apple product, but there are a lot of different editing products out there. Adobe Premiere Pro, iMovie, some of you are probably familiar with these already. And editing and the art of editing is probably a whole nother webinar, but here are a few pointers. Editing your film is basically pulling all the bits of your film together so that they work seamlessly as one. It should flow from one thought to the next. Now, as mentioned, there are several different edit packages that you can use, and with a bit of help of YouTube and Google, you can teach yourself to do it by yourself. It all depends on the level of time you've got and your level of expertise, and of course, if you've got the budget to spend on doing that yourself. But I'd say mostly trying to do it yourself is about time, because it can be quite time consuming. I would recommend sitting with a craft editor for the day. If you've saved some cash by filming all your material yourself, then if you've got a bit of budget, I would spend that on the edit. It will make a huge difference to the overall look and feel of your film, and they will be much quicker. Retain control, though, by saying you want to be there with them to choose which bits you want and where. Interview clips should be short and to the point. As I explained, you should keep your interviews short. You'll probably listen back to your interviews and think, they're all brilliant, I can't possibly leave anything out, and I can't leave anything on the cutting room floor. Keep your interview clips short and to the point. 15 to 20 seconds max is fine. Any more and you'll lose your audience. Don't worry about what you've left out. It's what you put in that counts. Get plenty of voices in there, as we discussed. 5 in that 3-minute piece. If you've got a lot of young players in there, you can string them together like some vox pops, and it will get you more voices in. 5 to 10 is great. Probably more than 10 will be a bit of a squeeze, but 5 to 8 perhaps. Start and finish with your best shots, as we discussed. If music suits your film, sports films work really well with music because you can cut the action to the beat. That's really worth doing. You can open the piece with some upbeat music, lots of action shots. Just make sure it's free to use. So I wouldn't choose something from the Beatles' back catalogue, for example. It would be probably out of bounds or hideously expensive. There are plenty of websites you can go to that will give you music that you can pay for a one-off fee and reuse it in your film and on social media. So just check that it's free to reuse. Keep your film short, 3 to 4 minutes maximum. Any more, your audience will be lost. We consume so much content these days that our attention span is short. So 3 to 4 minutes maximum, no more than that. If you want to put your film out on social media as well, on your Instagram, your Twitter, your TikTok, you can create a shorter version for social media. So if you've made a 3-minute film, you can do a 1-minute cut down, and most edit packages will allow you to convert that to vertical so it works on a smartphone. You might also want to take out, if you've got some really great clips that you think would be a good teaser for your film, you may want to also lift out a couple of really good clips, convert those to vertical, and use them as kind of trailers or teasers on your social media with a link to the longer version that might appear on your website or YouTube. So you can use that film in so many different ways. Put your contact information at the end, and really important, always export a version for approval before you publish the final film. So send a version to your team or a second pair of eyes before exporting the final product. It's very easy to become so engrossed, so immersed in your project that you don't see small mistakes, or you don't realize that things need changing. And finally, good luck. You can always shout for help. I find that having a good shout sometimes really does help when you're a bit stuck. But if you want to shout for some more practical help, my contact details are on there. The top one is my personal email. The second one, my BBC email. I'm actually on sabbatical at the moment, but will return to the BBC in June. So you can contact me either way. And if you want to have a look at the range of sports I've covered and the kind of stories I've covered, the films I've done, you can just have a little scroll through my Twitter at jparkinsport. So thank you so much for listening and watching today. I hope that it's been useful, and I hope that for those of you who were a 1 or a 2 in the chat at the start are now maybe a 3 or a 4, and I hope you've picked up some good tips from today. So I'll throw it out for any questions.
That's brilliant, Juliette. Do you want to share your screen and then we can see some faces? Do you know what just blew my mind is that amazing 3-minute piece that you opened up with was filmed on a smartphone. So it does give it a degree that sort of the encouragement and the confidence that actually even without the kit you can do something. You're obviously very experienced at it, but that was really interesting. We do have a couple of questions. Kira, I think Juliette answered your question about audio and mic recommendations. If not, put it in the chat and we can maybe give you the details more specifically. Vix, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Hi everyone. Thank you very much, Juliette.
No worries. Nice to see you.
Nice to. It came about yesterday, so I've been making films for a while now, but something that the ongoing dilemma of increasing deliverables and trying to repurpose everything for social media. And it was from another top cycling agency, and basically they're experimenting and testing out the idea of mounting a camera, an iPhone on top of the main camera to be able to do the Instagram stories, because obviously reversioning is just tricky and costly from a budget point of view. But it'd be just interesting to know your thoughts on that from the BBC in particular.
That's really interesting, Vix. Quite a lot of my colleagues who are shooting at the moment will either just shoot on a smartphone, or they'll shoot on a broadcast style camera and they'll set up the smartphone on a mobile journalism kit right next to it.
They are. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. Something, because we've been doing it in post and it's so time consuming, but it's more about, I was just interested to know what's acceptable from a client side of things.
I mean, it's all time consuming. It's time consuming in the edit. If you do it in the edit afterwards, you can set them up side by side, which is also time consuming, but then you've got it already and you don't have to convert it in the edit. The other thing I'd say, if you're doing an interview with a broadcast camera and then you think, oh, that was a brilliant clip, I just want to run that 20-second clip on my Instagram, just quickly do that clip. Can I just ask that question again, and can I do it in vertical?
Yeah.
If you're listening and you pick out one clip that you think that's brilliant, just ask it again. And most interviewees, unless they've got to suddenly dash for a train or something, would do that again for you.
Yeah, it's just working with the elite sportsmen. Their time is always so tight, and you end up, that one question too many, and then you lose them. Even if it's the greatest will in the world.
In that respect, and set the smartphone up at the same time.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm not quite sure who it is because it's got my name against it, but have you got any camera lens recommendations, especially for nighttime football shoots?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I am not an expert in lenses, unfortunately. We shoot on JVC video cameras at work. You also see the massive news cameras, but they're being phased out. I'm sorry, I can't answer that one with any great deal of expertise. I kind of use what I'm given and make the best of that. I would say some decent lighting is well worth having, a lightweight lighting stand, and you can get some decent lighting kits, or just a little, as shown, a little top mic, light for your camera as well works. But in terms of lenses and cameras, I'm sorry, I can research that one for you and get back to you. I'm not an expert in lenses and cameras, I'm afraid.
Okie doke, thank you. Esther, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, happy to ask my question myself. The reason for the question is, obviously we're trying to create role models in women's sport and trying to increase the profile of women's sport. So I was just wondering if you had any tips for how to create heroes in the visual storytelling, if there's anything specific to consider that would increase that kind of hero feel around players and subjects.
I guess I think that is choosing really good interview clips, and again, as I went through, is placing them. Think about where you're putting them in terms of location, and think about what you're asking them and the clips, because so much that sells our video is about what they're saying and the message they're getting across. So much of what I was talking about today was the message, and I think, if you're really trying to get that hero message across, that's in the interview clip, that's in what they're saying, that's in the setting you're putting them in. I don't know if I'm being terribly helpful there. Sorry. How to get them out there, or how to get them more seen, or?
Yeah, I don't. Just if there's a particular way of presenting the subject, through framing or through certain questions, or kind of like just to really emphasize that kind of role model position, or like really put them into that role model frame? That was, yeah, I just was wondering if you had any thoughts or advice on that.
Well, I think a massive part of that is location, where you put them, where you film them. So obviously it's got to be a location that is 100% relevant to who they are and what they do. If they're inspiring the next generation, you know, choose a location where you can film them with younger players, or a location that is relevant to the sport they're doing. Interview them in situ, in their kit, what they're doing, and make sure that those interview clips are clear, well recorded, and that you use them to your advantage in the edit. So pick out the very, very best and strongest clips that really promotes that person. And again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of good sound and getting a quality microphone on them. Another really good tip, if you want to show them what they're doing and really bring out who they are and the sort of person they are, if you put a personal mic on, like one of these I showed you earlier, it will allow your subject to move around. So a really good way of interviewing somebody who perhaps they're an athlete is chat to them while they're training. So run alongside them. If they're a cyclist, could they chat while they're cycling? Could you be talking to them and get some interview clips while they're actually in action? So as much action we can see of that person, the better. You can't portray how great somebody is if they're just sitting behind a desk. You want to see them in action as much as possible, in situ, doing what they're doing, perhaps doing your interview on the fly while they're doing their sport.
Yeah, brilliant advice. Thank you. Jo, I love your question. Do you want to come off and ask yourself?
Thanks, Juliette. That was great. I know that this is a really changeable and rapidly evolving area, but I was just interested if that you had any thoughts or experiences with AI tools, AI-driven tools. So,
no.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't. Not helpful to you. I'm sorry, I don't. I have seen the industry rapidly change, as you say. I mean, when I started filming 22 years ago, it was very, very different to what it is now. So I am struggling to keep up as much as everybody else. So I'm sorry, I don't, and I can't help you there. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I've literally just started using Descript this week, which is an AI editor, and it's already seems to be a game changer. And it's interesting what you were saying, because I was about to look into buying a microphone or a lapel mic, and they've got, just even on the free version, a studio sound option. You just click it and the sound, it just changes it completely, and that's through using my webcam. So it's interesting how these things are changing, and maybe it's going to drive even less need for the more expensive kit, but I don't know. I'm a novice, so.
Well, that's very interesting what you say, because actually that film I shot part on a broadcast camera in HD, and I shot most of it on a smartphone in 4K. And a smartphone in 4K produced much better results than an expensive video camera in HD. So, you know, it's difficult. Yes, the smartphones are so good these days, but you have to have the bits to go with them, the broadcast quality microphones to make it work. As a quality film, I think.
Brilliant. Just one time for one quick question, which I'll just ask from I'm not sure who that is. Oh, it's me again. So it's not me, but it's got my name against it. So when you talk about not giving people the interview questions, but to give them an idea of what the talk will about, is it possible that the interview can be surprised because of the questions and not give you a good result?
I think if you've given them the areas for questioning, there's no reason why they should be surprised. So if, for example, you'll say, I want to talk to you about your club, or I want to talk to you roughly about your aims for this year, but you don't give them the specific question, there's no reason why they should be stumped by it. but just avoid giving them the exact question, because they will go and rehearse. And I think if you want to keep it relaxed, informal and natural, which most of us do for our films, that's how we want to come across, just avoid the actual question. But I don't think anyone would be surprised if you gave them the areas for questioning.
Brilliant, thank you so much. There's just lots of lovely comments about the session there, Juliette. So a huge thank you for your time in prepping your presentation today and for your time in presenting it. It's really interesting and I have learned tons. So thank you very much. And thank you to everybody for coming and joining us this afternoon. The recording, if it's okay with Juliette, will be on the website in the next couple of days. So please go back and look at anything. There was a question about whether it would be nice to get a list of kit that would be useful. I don't know how hard or easy that is to do, Juliette, but maybe with a tight budget or a medium budget. I don't think anybody's probably in sports got a huge budget, but if that was something that we could do. But I will talk to Juliette afterwards and let you know if that's something we can. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, everybody.